my mother-in-law stole my baby's college fund. She didn't take it in a moment of passion or because she needed to eat. She took the account statements, drained the 529, and wired $53,200 out of our family's future and into a shell account she controlled. She signed my husband's name on transfer forms, or the bank accepted it as if she had the right to do so. And when I opened the account app one ordinary afternoon and saw the balance at zero, the last thing I expected was that betrayal would come from the woman who brought my husband into the world. It hurt because she had been the one we trusted. She was the person who watched our son on Tuesdays, who showed up with casseroles when I had a baby, who sat with us while we filed taxes when my husband got laid off. Why, she talked about college as if it were a shared dream. "We'll make sure Sammy has options," she'd say, and she taught our child how to count quarters and saved every birthday card in a shoebox. To have that future taken by someone who'd earned a place in our household felt like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged the bones. We let her manage the money for reasons that seemed reasonable at the time. I'll get to that in a minute. First, I want the moment of discovery to be clear and immediate. An email from the 529 provider at 2:13 p.m., a red banner that read "Important Distribution Notice," and a number I did not expect. I stared. Then I called my husband. He said he'd look. He did not understand the number either. He called his mother. She sounded surprised on the phone, then annoyed, then vaguely amused, and finally defensive. She promised it was a mistake. She promised she would fix it. She sent screenshots of an account that no longer existed and told us we'd been hacked. She told my husband, with the same calm voice she used to cut a roast for Christmas, that these things happen and we shouldn't panic. I panicked. We were not rich people. We do not have a trust fund or a family office. The $53,000 was not the entirety of our financial life, but it was the handle we had on possibility. It was the thing that meant when our son applied for a school where tuition ran to 6 figures, he could at least choose without being crushed by costs. It was the money my mother deposited her tax returns into each year. The money I had matched when bonuses came in. The money my husband's grandmother had wrote a check for when the baby was born. We watched it grow with an odd pride, like parents watching a sapling. And in one transaction, a transfer that left a notation with my mother-in-law's initials, it disappeared. Why I couldn't simply leave? That was the reason I let someone I did not fully know into this part of my life in the first place. My husband and I were still paying off student loans when we had the baby. He worked in sales. His job had been good, then uncertain, then unstable again. When the company reorganized in 2019, he lost his role and took a lower paid position that included long evenings and travel. I worked partly remote and partly at a clinic where the hours were rigid. We had a mortgage and 2 cars and a daycare bill that ate a third of my monthly paycheck. My mother had health problems. Her medication costs were rising. My husband's mother was close by and offered to help. She offered to look after the money because she had experience with finances. She'd run a small boutique for years, she said. And more importantly, she could sit at the bank and talk to people in person in the way busy people cannot. We signed a few forms to make transfers easier. We sent logs and passwords and 2-factor codes on a few occasions. We let ourselves be reassured. The power imbalance became clear later, but in the beginning, it was practical. She had afternoon availability, she had the phone number the account rep used, and for reasons of convenience, we let her into a space we should have kept to ourselves. We did not notice the pattern of small withdrawals she called family loans, or the late-night transactions that matched her preferences for antique furniture and weekend trips. She repaid some of those small loans with explanations that made sense. A broken hot water heater, a car repair, money advanced for a funeral. Each time she returned a portion, we told ourselves that family helps family and did not ask too many questions. Escalation followed like weather. The first wave was small. I'd find receipts for dinners in a folder labeled Sammy's expenses and feel guilty that I hadn't kept better notes. I'd ask, "Did you use the college account for this?" And she would smile and say, "Oh, I transferred that back, don't worry." My husband would shrug and say we could reconcile later. Each small lie built pressure. A late fee on our mortgage, then a missed payment that required calling the lender and begging for leniency. We took on extra shifts. We ate simple meals. We paused our retirement contributions for a year. Each cut was a weight we wore privately. The second wave changed the tone. She began to tell my husband that she had the family's best interests at heart in ways that made him defensive. "I'm keeping an eye on things you're too tired to watch," she told him over the phone. If I didn't step in, who knows what would happen? She praised him in front of me for being grateful and responsible. In private, he grew quieter. He stopped bringing home printouts of the account. He told me the bank had called her because of a problem with our social security number, and she had sorted it. I wanted to believe him. I told myself we had to trust the person who'd been trusted for decades. Then came a small humiliation. At a parent meeting for Sammy's preschool, my mother-in-law cornered me about the cost of private enrichment classes and asked aloud why I was letting actors and artists take our boys' dollars. She insisted that with her help, our son would have a more practical future. The comments were not cruel, but they were exclusionary. People nodded. I blushed. I felt ridiculous defending myself in a school gymnasium. Later, at home, I found that she'd signed Sammy up for a weekend workshop without telling us and had paid using a family card. I called the workshop. They remembered her name and the check number. The number matched a distribution in my account history. When I asked her about it, she said she'd simply arranged it. When I asked my husband, he said, "Well, she did it for Sammy." The pattern accelerated. Small lies became broader denials. I would find paper trails, bank branch slips, handwritten notes that suggested she was the one physically initiating transfers. My husband's responses hardened into a protective silence. He stopped answering my questions in the living room. He would leave the room and tell me to calm down. At night, I would wake to the sound of the dryer and find him scrolling his phone in the garage, trying to avoid the conversation. Our intimacy frayed into silence. Pressure increased when my mother's own health worsened. Medical bills soared. We borrowed from a credit union to cover part of it. My husband suggested we ask his mother for help with a short-term loan because she had access to cash. I argued against it, but the next day there was a transfer labeled Loan Family for $1,500. She called to tell me it was done, as if I should be grateful she'd supplied help at no interest. I felt manipulated. I told my husband that she shouldn't be touching this money. He told me she'd already told the bank. She'd already done it. He sounded tired, and I could see how beholden he was to patterns he'd known since childhood. Her opinion mattered more than his paperwork. When I broached the subject with friends, they asked why I hadn't frozen the account or closed the login. It's a reasonable question. For one thing, closing the account would have required us to move money elsewhere, to set up a new plan, to face fees and penalties. For another, there was a relational cost I underestimated. My husband's mother had always been the family interpreter. She smoothed migrations, advised on in-laws' disputes, mediated between siblings. To confront her directly felt, absurdly, like attacking our own family history. And because he loved her, my husband repeatedly chose to believe her. So each day that went by, I felt more isolated inside my marriage, watching money leave in neat legal lines while my voice stayed small. The stakes rose when she started to mischaracterize herself in public. At a church luncheon, she announced she had managed our family's investments, and a neighbor congratulated her for saving money for Sammy's education. I felt a flush of shame that anyone could see us that way. I went home and checked the transaction history again. There were more transfers labeled with little notes, only she would write, Sam's tuition, gift for Sammy, advance. One of them paid for a down payment on a condo a county over, a tidy amount deposited into a title company account in her name. When I confronted her, she said the condo was an investment she'd make for family visits. She said it like it was a present. I said nothing because my husband at my elbow said, "It's her property, Ellie. You can't tell her what to buy." Humiliation deepened when relatives began to take sides. My husband's sister hinted that I was overreacting, that I didn't understand the sacrifices their mother had made. An aunt asked in a tone like an accusation whether my husband and I were being irresponsible with our own finances and expecting the family to fund every need. I began to walk more carefully in my own home. I checked bank notifications before answering texts. I stopped trusting cash gifts and receipts. Each new slight from the people who were supposed to be close was its own kind of theft. There were threats too, not legal ones, not at first, but subtle warnings about what would happen if I pressed the matter. When I tried to have a calm conversation with her in the kitchen, she let her voice drop and said, "You don't know how this family works. You shouldn't stir things up." There was a smile, a butter knife, the clink of plates. The words landed cold. When I told my husband, he said she didn't mean it. Then he admitted that he was afraid of losing his mother. That line, afraid of losing her, was the moment I understood the scale of the imbalance. He had built a safety net around her over decades, and I was the person who entered and disrupted the net. Our arguments grew sharper. He accused me of not trusting the family. I accused him of letting his mother use our life. We argued about receipts, about statements printed off and hidden in kitchen drawers. He said he would handle it. He did not. He began to protect his emotions, not the money. He would come home with a prepared calm that did not reach his eyes. Sometimes he would text me at work a picture of Sammy, and it was the only thing that kept me steady. An escalation loop finished with a real shock, a meeting at the bank after a visit with my husband's mother that left me shaking. She had arranged with the branch manager to discuss a clerical error. The manager, a man who'd known all of them since the boutique days, handed us a set of scanned documents. One of them was a signature slip that matched my husband's scrawl, but the metadata showed it was completed on a date he had been in another state on business. The manager apologized and said the bank had its own investigation underway. He said softly that sometimes family accounts can be misused by well-intentioned relatives. His voice was careful. Mine was not. I walked out of the bank and felt like a ghost, because what followed was worse. The manager told us that there had been multiple withdrawals totaling $53,200, that some transfers had been made to an account with my mother-in-law's name, that she had used the funds to purchase vintage furniture and to put a deposit on that condo. That day, my husband went to his mother's house. He was gone for hours. When he came back, his face had the flat look of someone who has learned a truth he is not willing to speak aloud. He told me she'd insisted she had a right to manage family gifts. She had told him, in a slow voice, that she'd done us favors and that this was compensation. She had told him that in a way that made him laugh nervously because it was so absurd. He believed her partial explanations and wept a little and said he was sorry he had trusted her. I felt my leverage slip away when the police told us they could open a file, but that financial crimes are complicated and resources are limited. The detective was not uncaring. She was honest. She said she would make inquiries, subpoena records, ask the bank to freeze accounts if it could. But she also said there was not enough evidence yet to arrest someone. She explained the difference between civil and criminal actions and suggested we hire a lawyer if we wanted to pursue restitution aggressively. The word civil felt like a polite way of saying that the system moves slowly and sometimes not at all. We could sue, the detective said. Suing costs money. Suing takes months. Suing can wreck family relationships beyond repair. I had to weigh whether chasing the money would cost more than the money itself. Then my low point came. It was not a dramatic collapse. There were no shouting breaks, no cinematic scenes of a woman burning photos in the yard. The low point had a tenderness to it. I sat on the edge of our son's bed while he slept, the night after my husband left for a week of travel, and I held a small scrap of paper in my hand. It was a printout of the last statement, the one with zero balance in black. I pressed my thumb into the margin as if that could make the numbers rearrange themselves. Our son's breath was even. His small fist curled under his cheek. He had a mole on his shoulder like a freckle in the shape of a comma. I thought of a future in which he might apply to a school that asked us for proof of funding, and we would have to say that someone had taken it. I thought about telling him years from now that the family who promised security had taken his options. I felt hollow and violated in a way that had nothing to do with money. It was about trust and being betrayed by a person I had fed, housed, and let into the most careful parts of our life. At that point, I felt abandoned. My husband was not openly hostile, but he excused her in ways that felt like abandonment. He insisted that she was not a criminal, and in doing so, he positioned himself on the side of denial. There was a brief moment where I thought we would split, not only from his mother, but from each other. He loved her still, and the love made him judge me. I could not make him see the numbers in the same way I could. I slept in the guest room for a week. I cried in the shower. I did not call my mother because I did not want to create another worry for her. I felt small and enraged and scared all at once. The quiet part of it, the part where a person reconsiders every habit and memory, was the worst. The turning point was a mistake her own arrogance made. She sent an email to our family group thread to announce an engagement party for the new condo she'd found. The subject line, celebrating our new space for visits. She attached a photo of a modern living room and a receipt she seemed proud of, a scan from the title company with the deposit and last 4 digits of the account that had funded the payment. I saw it at midnight, scrolling through my phone in the dark. The receipt matched one of the withdrawals. In her haste to show off, she had left a breadcrumb. I did not confront her in the family thread. Instead, I printed the receipt and took it to the detective. So the breadcrumb gave the bank a direct path. The title company confirmed the source of the funds. They traced the wire to the Shell account. That account had been funded directly from the 529 transfers. The bank, embarrassed and now alerted, broadened its internal audit. The coincidence of that email and the bank's new report gave the detective the evidence she needed to label the transfers as unauthorized and to move forward with a criminal referral. There was no cinematic confession, no tearful admission at the kitchen table. What happened was administrative and cold and perfect. A subpoena, then an arraignment, then a charge that the district attorney's office described as theft and misappropriation of funds. The paper felt weighty and terrible. My husband was in the room when his mother was served. He sat with a hand on his face and did not look at me. He said later that he felt numb and small. He said that he would stand by me. The next day, he took 2 days off work. The consequences were practical and precise. Her phone went silent. The condo deposit was seized by the title company pending the court's decision. The bank reversed some of the transfers because of consumer protection rules. They returned $30,000 of the $53,000 after finding irregularities in how the signatures had been processed. The detective asked us to testify at a preliminary hearing. The bank's compliance officer produced logs showing that a single IP address had been used to log into the account on dates that matched her shopping sprees. The title company produced the deposit records. These were small and tangible things, evidence of money moving, and they mattered more than anything else. We felt some relief, practical as it was, but relief was not the same as resolution. She was charged, yes, but a charge is a beginning. There were hearings and motions and delays. She hired a lawyer who argued that she had acted as a family fiduciary and that any transfers were loans to family that had been mutually understood. The lawyer's phrasing, fiduciary, mutual, understood, was a defense designed to blur lines. We watched as our private life became a series of depositions. The lawyer asked about our conversations, about our agreements, about whether we'd given consent. There were forms we'd signed that looked on first glance permissive. The court considered intent and documentation and whether she had indeed misrepresented things. During the hearings, she sat on the second row and folded tissues into neat squares. She looked like herself and not a criminal. When she was asked a routine question about the transfers, she looked at the judge and said, in a voice that had once soothed a newborn, that she had believed she was doing the right thing. I felt no satisfaction. I felt a strange legal suspension. The system was going to decide whether her belief could be excused. Meanwhile, our family was not the same. My husband's relationship with his mother fractured beyond repair. He did not visit her in the hospital when she developed an infection a month later. He did not attend family dinners. He became measured and careful with his words. And when he talked to me, he apologized too often. Practical consequences followed the legal ones. The bank's partial restitution covered much of the immediate hole in Sammy's fund, but not all. We applied for emergency grants and scholarship funds and found an education planner who helped us reconfigure our approach. We tightened our budget further. My husband took extra travel and overtime. I took a part-time evening job at a small clinic on Saturdays, another pair of shoes, another shift. The extra money did not bring the same peace. It brought the quiet knowledge that we could rebuild, slowly, even if the scars would remain. There were personal consequences too. I stopped letting my son sleep over at his grandmother's. The absence of that casual contact was a strange grief. He missed the way her hands smelled of lavender and the small coins she saved in a jar for him. He asked about her sometimes, with a childish simplicity that cut me through. I would say, she needs to take some time off, or we're keeping some distance. He accepted it in the way children accept changed rules, with resilience that felt like an accusation. He would bring home a drawing for his grandmother and then fold it into his pocket as if keeping a secret. There was no dramatic collapse in the mother-in-law's life either. She pleaded not guilty at first and then accepted a plea deal after months. The plea resulted in a combination of restitution, community service, and probation. She would have to repay a portion of the funds over 5 years and attend financial counselling. The title company reclaimed the condo deposit. The vintage furniture dealer cooperated with a return of some items. The court's orders were precise and sober. They did not feel like vengeance so much as an attempt at repair, a legal mechanism to put numbers back where they belonged. The family's emotional repair was slower. My husband and I negotiated boundaries that felt like scaffolding for a home being rebuilt. He stopped answering calls when his mother texted about trivial things. He blocked her on social media. He agreed to a month of no contact to give me space. He apologized for not seeing the signs sooner. He did not say he had been wrong. He said he had been blind. Those words mattered less than the change in his actions. He held me differently. He sat at the kitchen table with the tax forms and learned how to set up a new college account. We started a small weekly ritual where we counted coins and watched the number inch up. We used the bank statements as a way of teaching our son something about money without making it a burden. The legal resolution brought a kind of closure with loose edges. The restitution schedule is waking me frequently. The payments are not automatic, and there is a doubt that some will never fully return. Yet there is progress. The child has the intact possibility of education from a mix of restored funds and new savings. He will not be able to assume full tuition at elite institutions, but he will be able to choose among reasonable schools. We have applied for financial aid and scholarships. We have met with guidance counsellors who remind us that options exist that are not only about one account balance. Emotionally, I have a set of small, private things I do to hold myself together. I keep a folder with the bank's correspondence in a drawer. I have a photograph of my son on my desk with paint smudges across his cheek from a recent art project, and I look at it when the news makes me feel brittle. I write lists of small, immediate goals and cross them off. I give myself credit for practical decisions and try not to ask whether any of it could have been prevented. The question is a trap that leads only to guilt. The most important consequence is not what the court did or the money returned. It is that we learned the hard way to set lines earlier. My husband learned to listen in a different way. He now asks me to go through statements together every month. He watches for the small anomalies I used to shoulder alone. He does the phone calls to the bank and reads the fine print. Our son has a routine for savings. He has a small jar and we match what he puts into it. He learned in simple terms that some adults make mistakes and that money is a shared responsibility. I do not think the mother-in-law changed profoundly. People rarely do after a short sentence or structured restitution. What changed is the architecture around her. She no longer has the casual access to accounts. She no longer shows up unannounced at our house expecting dinner or a hand with the baby. The family pieces itself together in a new arrangement of rooms. She sometimes calls and leaves a message that is a mix of regret and defensiveness. My husband listens and sometimes replies with a line that is as careful as the judge's orders. There is a quiet grief, though. We lost an entire narrative of what family looked like. The childhood photos and holiday rituals remain, but they are slightly tarnished. We hold the past as though it were a fragile object that could break if handled too roughly. I am sometimes surprised by flashes of anger. I am sometimes surprised by how ordinary the pain feels. Most days it is something I carry and manage. It is the price we paid for trust misplaced and for the practical convenience that once seemed harmless. I have no illusions about the neatness of justice. The plea bargain meant she avoided a long sentence. It also meant she admitted to wrongdoing in a legal sense. She will be paying back part of the money, but some items she sold cannot be returned. There are relationships that will not be restored. The prosecutor said, quietly, that this case would be on the record, that matters to some people and not to others. For me, the most tangible change is that our son's account now has a guardian that is both of us, not someone else. My name appears in the bank. My husband's name appears. We are both signers, and the account password is secured behind a two-factor authentication only we control. We made a legal document that requires both of us to authorize distributions. I sleep a little more easily. I do not want to pretend that the end of the legal process erased what happened. I will carry the memory of that stolen balance for the rest of my life. I will recall, sometimes with a jolt, the image of the empty number on the screen and the way my husband's face looked when he first learned of it. I will hold on to a sharper sense of how trust, once broken, changes everything you thought was stable. There is one small kindness I allowed myself. I collected 3 envelopes from the bank with the returned funds and put them in a shoebox with a label, Sammy's College, Rebuild. I vow to be a careful steward of it. The shoebox sits on the shelf in our bedroom next to the baby's first sweater. Every so often, I take the envelopes out and run my fingertips across the dates, the stamps, the faint ink. It's not dramatic. It's like a person who has learned to check the locks at night. It is a mundane but steady thing that reminds me I am not irresponsible. It reminds me that promises can be enforced, not always with vengeance, but with accountability. If you ask me how I feel about my mother-in-law now, I would say this. I do not hate her in the cartoon sense. There are times when I pity her. There are times when I am furious. Mostly, I am clear. Clarity is different from closure. Clarity is knowing the shape of a person and the actions they took. Closure is something quieter. Papers that say restitution, a bank that has corrected some numbers, the simple, methodical rebuilding of a small fund. I tell this story because it is the shape of one family's fracture, and because someone else might recognize the pattern. We let convenience bruise into control. We let deference become delegation. We trusted a person who had the power to do harm because she also had the power to help. That combination is dangerously easy to mistake for virtue. I am not asking for sympathy. I am not offering rules for life. I am only telling you what happened and what followed. There were small, stubborn acts of repair, a lawyer who believed us, a detective who took notes seriously, and a bank that corrected errors when shown the trail. There were practical sacrifices, a part-time job, a tightened budget, a jar for Sammy's coins. There were necessary losses, dinners, visits, holiday rituals that will have to be reimagined. If you're listening and you've had something similar happen, you might be thinking about the details. What bank, what documents, how to make a legal case. I won't give you phone numbers or play lawyer in this room. What I will say is this: keep records, insist on dual control. And when it comes to money for a child's future, make sure the people authorized are the parents. It is not a moral lecture. It is a practical observation learned through cost. We are not dramatic people. We are people who made a mistake and paid for it in ways that matter. We are a family that lives in the ordinary world where bills still come due and small joys, a scratched knee, a school play, still keep the longer arc intact. In that sense, the story ends with something quiet. A boy with a paint-smudged face running into the yard. A couple who argue sometimes but do the household books together at night. And a mother-in-law who will have to find a way to live with the consequences of what she did. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. If this resonated, please leave a like. It helps people who need to hear this story find it. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe. And if you've been through anything similar, I'd like to know, what's one small practical thing you did that helped you rebuild?